This is Molly. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Purpose, where we talk about that very thing. What is our purpose for being on this earth? And you know, if you've been watching my videos, what I think. I think we've only got two reasons to be here: to love God and love each other. Sounds easy, but it's not. It's the hardest thing ever. And it takes work. It takes effort. I think most people in this country anyway, in America, believe in God, but not a lot of people put the time and the effort in and the work to get to know him more and more every day. Maybe they do, but in the polls that they take, not a lot of people seem to be working to get to know God more and more. Even though they believe that there is an almighty God, they don't do a whole lot to get to know him. And how do you get to know God? He gave us the Bible. He gave us directions. And that's what we're doing. We're going through here and reading these stories. And boy, are we on a good one now. This next story that we're going to talk about is so huge. I took notes, and I never take notes for these videos. But I took notes. That's how important this is. The way we read this story of Abraham getting tested, it's in Genesis chapter 22, verses 1 through 19. The way we read this very short little story is going to set the tone for the rest of the Bible. It's going to hopefully change the way we live our lives. It's huge. So we're just going to jump in, and I'm probably going to split this into 2 or 3 videos because it's that important and that big. But we've already talked about Abraham and how he wanted a son more than anything in the world. Well, a child, really. Didn't have to be a son, but God told him he was going to have a son. God promised him and Sarah, I'm going to give you a baby. I'm going to give you a son. And it just never came. They prayed and they prayed and they prayed. But God works on a different timetable than us, and it just wasn't coming. And then Sarah went through menopause, and they almost gave up hope. But they didn't. They kept praying. They kept trusting in God. And then boom, she had a baby, Isaac. And you know they loved Isaac more than anything. He was the joy of their whole life. And now it's saying here in Genesis 22, God said, hey, Abraham. And Abraham jumped up right up. You know, here I am, God, what do you need? And the only way he could do that is if he meditates on God all day and he's thinking about him in the back of his mind. While he's going about his day, doing his work, he's thinking about God. That's the only way we can hear him. Otherwise, we get all caught up in ourselves and our lives, and we push God right out. So that tells us Abraham is still strong in his faith and believing in God. And God says to him, take Isaac, your only son, take him up to Mount Moriah, and I want you to offer him as a burnt sacrifice. What? Back the sacrifice train up here. He's asking Abraham to take his much beloved only son up to the top of a mountain and offer him as a sacrifice to God. Kill him, burn him. Well, what did Abraham say? Abraham got up early the next morning, took 2 of his workers and his son Isaac, cut a bunch of wood, loaded up the donkeys, and headed to Mount Moriah. Now, you know Abraham had to spend all that night just worrying and stressed and praying. He trusted God. He had faith. He could have said no. He could have said, whoa, God, this is too much. You just gave me this son. I can't kill him. No. It would kill his mother. No, not doing it. Abraham could have said no. He had free will. He could have said no. But he didn't. Why? Because he had faith. It wasn't that he didn't care about Isaac. He loved Isaac so much. But he had faith that God would take care of him, that God knew what he was doing, that God had a plan, and that God would not let any harm come to him or Isaac. So they headed off for Mount Moriah, and they got to pretty close to where they were going. Took them 3 days to get there. I think that 3 days is important. Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days. Jesus, when he was crucified, went down to hell and rose again on the 3rd day. He went down to hell to get people to take him up to heaven. But 3 days before his resurrection. So that's an important number. And I think it's a time where you're showing how much faith you have. You're getting your faith on. 3 days. Us being on this earth is our 3 days. We've got to show God how much faith we have. So anyway, Abraham told the people, you stay back here, and I'm going to take Isaac up, and we'll have our sacrifice, and then we'll come on back down. And so now Isaac's carrying all this wood, which tells me, well, I'll get to that in a minute. He's carrying all this wood for the fire, and they climb up to the top of the mountain. And Isaac said, hey, Dad. And Abraham said, here I am, son. He's fully paying attention to God, and he's fully paying attention to his son. Abraham is very present in the moment. He's always got God in the back of his mind, but he's always present on his son too. And Isaac said, we've got the wood. Where's the sacrifice? What are we going to offer for the sacrifice? And Abraham said, God will give us the sacrifice. God's going to tell us what we need to have here. And so he'll give us what we need. So they went up. Abraham built an altar. That had to take some time. And he laid the wood on it. And then he bound up Isaac. He tied up Isaac, put him on the altar, had the knife ready to slit his throat. Right at the last minute, at the final second, an angel says, whoa, Abraham, Abraham. And Abraham stops and he's like, here I am. So he's praying this whole time. He's talking to God. He's begging him to help him, begging him. And an angel comes to him. It says, Abraham, don't touch a hair on that kid's head. Do not lay your hand to him. God saw what you were willing to do here. And God sees everything. He knows what you were willing to do. And he doesn't want you to hurt Isaac. And Abraham looks up. Right there, caught in a thicket, a bunch of brush, was a ram, a male sheep. And that was going to be the sacrifice that he was to use. So that's what they did. They got the sheep and they had the sacrifice. And the angel came back to Abraham again and said, God is fulfilling his end of the covenant with you. He's going to bless all of your descendants, and you're going to have a bunch of them. They will all be blessed. They're all going to multiply, as many as the stars in heaven or the sand in the sea, just like God promised him. And by your descendants shall all the nations of the earth bless themselves, because you obeyed my voice. You obeyed me. You did what I told you to do. Even when it was scary, even when it was hard to do, even when you didn't understand it. You had faith. So like I said, we're going to split this up into several videos. So hopefully you watch it tomorrow. But the biggest thing I want to talk about right now before we close is about Isaac. I always pictured this story as, because we've all heard it, right? I always pictured this as Isaac being a little kid, like 5, 6, 7 years old. And Abraham's wrestling him down and holding him down and tying him up. I don't think that's true. First of all, Abraham was a very old man by this time. And Isaac carried all that wood up. That was a lot of wood. To build a fire, to sacrifice somebody on, that was a lot of wood. It wasn't a couple of sticks. He had to be at least a late teenager, maybe even early to mid-20s. He wasn't a little child. He was older, strong enough to carry that wood. He could have fought Abraham off easily. He could have been like, whoa, Dad, this whole God thing, you're taking it way too far. But he didn't. He didn't. He didn't fight Abraham. He willingly allowed himself to be tied up. He willingly got up on that altar and laid there while Abraham held the knife to his throat. He willingly was offering himself as a sacrifice. Sounds like somebody else we know. We'll talk about that in another video. But for right now, I just want to make sure that everyone who watches this knows when you read the Bible, you have to take it into context. Before you can come to any conclusions, you have to read the whole Bible, beginning to end. Read it all. Know the story of salvation. And then when you go back and look at the stories, you can say, I see what God's doing here. He's tricky. Having Isaac willingly give himself up for sacrifice, having a ram, a male sheep in the thicket to be the sacrifice instead. Oh, this God, he's good. He's good. But you have to know the whole story. You can't take little bits and pieces of it out of context. You have to look at it as a whole. And we learned in the very beginning of these videos that God is pure love, absolute pure love. He could never harm a person. He could not harm Isaac because he's pure love. He could not ask for Abraham to harm Isaac because he's pure love. God knew the ending. He knew how this was going to end. He would never ask Abraham to harm Isaac if he really thought Isaac was going to be harmed. He would never have allowed Isaac to get hurt. And there are people in this world who are mentally ill, who believe they're hearing the voice of God and God is asking them to sacrifice their children or to kill someone to prove how much they love him or whatever. That's mental illness. That is not faith. That is not love. That is not God. It's a mental illness. Because God would never ask us to hurt another person. He couldn't. He's pure love. He can't. So we have to take this into context. We have to know the end of the story. And we have to understand that God is pure love and his only goal is to get us back to him. And we can't stop here with this story. We can't stop with just knowing that Isaac gave himself up willingly. We have to know more about it. So I really hope you come back and watch our next video where we're going to talk about faith and that this whole story is a story of faith. And then we'll have another video about Jesus and where Jesus fits into this story. This is huge stuff. I really hope that you come back. But for right now, just know that God might ask us to do difficult things. He might ask us to do things we don't want to do, but he will never ask us to do more than we can, and he would never ask us to hurt anyone or to cause harm to anyone. He just wouldn't do it. Well, I hope you enjoyed the start of this video or this story, and I hope you come back with me next time. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.